So Mark, you're writing a new book. I mentioned that Mark is writing a book, and he'll explain that. And he's going to talk about some of the principles. The book is about the principles of Tai Chi. And one of the principles is maintaining the structure and release, being able to release and maintain the structure. So he'll give us some of the principles that are in his book. So yeah, so this whole idea of maintaining structure and being full with the structure, and at the same time being able to have energy flow without disturbing the structure, but the structure not disturbing the flow of energy.
So, because of COVID, I've had the opportunity to sit down and write now. So over the last 2 years, I've been assembling what I've been doing as a teacher and what I've been doing just in my own studies, because, you know, primarily I regard myself as a student of the art. And I derive so much joy from it, as I'm sure everybody here does, that it's just an honor and a privilege to be able to share it with as many people as I can touch. And my own background has been somewhat eclectic. So it's different than a lot of people who have had a single teacher that they've worked with over time. And what I've done over the course of my years is I've worked with a lot of different teachers. And the core thing that I think I found to do after I found the different styles of Tai Chi that I explored was really, it's really about being able to apply the principles into everything that you do in the Tai Chi, and every bit of the form, every bit of the push hands. And so those are kind of the two things that I primarily focused on. I did have a martial arts background before I was exploring Tai Chi, although the first art that I ever did was Tai Chi. So the very first taste I had, but I was a young buck and I was interested in being able to mix it up and spar and fight and things like that. And I thought, you know, Tai Chi is for old people, you know, like in their 30s. And so I didn't get into it until I was in my 30s. And then I found out that being old is a little different than that, but that's another story. So what I wanted to talk to her, what I had mentioned to Luke last time that we were together was this idea that I really see Tai Chi as primarily two lessons, and that everything comes back to those two lessons. And the two lessons that I see are what I call structure and release, or the terms Peng and Sung, which those two terms, we don't really have good translations in English to describe those two terms so well, but their meaning is extraordinarily important. And I think that everything that we do in Tai Chi eventually comes back to those two primary lessons, and everything is a sophisticated way of teaching us how to do those things and how to get the fundamental idea of central equilibrium, which I think is really the key to being able to unlock everything about Tai Chi. So when I think about the first lesson, I think the first lesson, which we learn when we start to teach the form, when we start to teach the movements, we need to learn how to move our bodies and how to hold our bodies, how to just simply be present, and what the postures are, where your feet are, which directions your hands are pointing, and all that kind of thing. The second lesson comes back down to this idea of Sung, or what's commonly spoken of in most Tai Chi teachers in America, certainly, is relax. And relax is a difficult word because so many people misconstrue it, and they think it's what you do when you sit down on the couch and you turn on, you know, YouTube or Netflix or something like that. And really, it's a very dynamic thing. It's a very engaged form of relaxation. So in the classics, it talks about being a cat stalking a mouse, or being a hawk on the wing hunting, that it's very lively and very, very much engaged. So the relaxation that we use in Tai Chi is not just a purely relaxed quality, but it's invigorated. It's filled with life. But that doesn't mean that it's completely without any kind of tension. There has to be a certain level of tension, just like if you want to use a rubber band, you need to have a certain amount of tightness to it in order to be able to have the rubber band be effective. So I draw the comparison of having a little wooden plane that I had as a boy and winding up the rubber band on the plane to make it fly, to make the propeller turn. And if I overwound it, which because I was a boy and I wanted to make it go as far as I possibly could, I'd overwind the rubber band and then it wouldn't work so well. So there's that optimal level of tension that's required that has that same quality where it's evenly dispersed throughout everything in the system. And so that quality of relax, or that quality of sung, or that quality, I like the word release, because the word release actually implies both directions. It implies the direction of relaxation where you let go, but it also the release, like when a dam opens the floodgates and the water flows. So I think this is something that Bob was mentioning, that it has to be able to be energized and be able to move. Now that quality that you're after is something that needs to be there, and it's kind of after you've learned how to do the basics. And I'm not talking about beginners who are learning how to do the choreography, but people who have moved along and have been doing this for a while and want to have that quality in it. That what you really have to be able to do is you have to be able to let that be the condition from which you're moving, so that the energy is moving through your body. And when that is there and is unimpeded, then as you move your body into the different positions, you still maintain that quality. So that's really key to be able to move through Tai Chi and maintain the kind of qualities that we're after, the quality of sung and the quality of structure. Because I spend a lot of my teaching time and my practice time in push hands and the applications, because a lot of the people that I teach have come from different backgrounds. They may not come from the same style of Tai Chi that I do. And to me, it's of no consequence what style you do or what your orientation was that you learned from. I'm not really necessarily trying to teach people to do it my way, because my way is just my way, and everybody's going to be different. But I want to be able to sit there, make sure that the principles are applied throughout what they're doing. And those two principles keep coming back to that idea of the structure, the pung, the basic inflated omnidirectional energy that is at the heart of Tai Chi, and the relaxation or the release that allows it to fill with the energy, the chi and the jin that we need in order to be able to become effective. Whether that efficacy is just pushing hands and playing with one another, or you're taking it all the way into the level of where you're looking at it as a self-defense art. So I think that those two lessons that we need to keep going back and forth. So as you get better with the structure and you hold your position, and now you can drop your shoulders and sink your elbows and have those qualities in there, you get a better sense of that sung. As the sung improves, it also then translates into improving back into your structure. So you have this relationship, this yin yang relationship of the Tai Chi flowing. One yin becomes yang and yang becomes yin, and they keep cycling back and forth together. Ultimately, all that is contingent upon being able to have really a good center, a really good center of balance. Central equilibrium is the term that we use in Tai Chi, because it involves both the physical center of balance and having that upright relationship with gravity, because gravity is, gravity's a law. It doesn't have any exceptions to gravity unless you leave the planet. So for all of us who are sitting here earthbound, we're always abiding by gravity. Gravity is always affecting us. And if we're in some kind of disharmonious relationship with gravity, we require tension to keep from falling, essentially. And if you have that proper relationship with gravity, then you're free to use the jin and the sung to instigate your movements. You're no longer bound by the tension that you're using, the excess tension that you're required to use to keep from falling. So this idea of having that, of having center is what you keep kind of balancing back and forth between those two things, between the structure and the release, between the two ideas that bring you back into that harmony. So when you learn the choreography, and let's say you're learning how to do single whip, well, you need to be able to maintain your central equilibrium throughout that movement. But of course, you're shifting in space, you're moving your feet, your arms are moving, the changing the posture that you're in. All that stuff requires you to still have that relationship to gravity and have that relationship to your center, and not get thrown, not get suddenly tense up and fight against gravity, which is what very often happens to us when we're doing the solo form. Or if you're involved in push hands, something like that, then you're dealing with the fact that when somebody comes at you, perhaps they come at you aggressively, or they get too close to you where you start to feel threatened. What we find is that they say the chi rises, the tension rises, your back tightens, your shoulders raise, you feel nervous, your thoughts start to race around. All these kind of things are manifestations of losing that quality of sung that you're actually cultivating as you do the form or as you do push hands. So that's kind of the reason that for me that I look at those two lessons. We keep coming back to them. I don't, however far I've gotten in this art, I still keep coming back to that very basic idea, those two basic ideas, that I have to have those qualities in order to be able to successfully perform. And in terms of dealing with students, because a lot of the students that I have been doing this for anywhere from 5 years to 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, whatever it might be, what we find is that we get to address the mechanisms that cause you to lose your central equilibrium, that cause you to lose the calmness, the poise, the emotional stability, and the physical stability that is kind of the, it's kind of the sign of having a Tai Chi quality. So I don't know if that is an explanation that comports with what other people feel or think, but that's kind of one of the components that I keep coming back to in the teaching that I do.
Any questions or comments? Billy, did you? Oh.
Well, one question. Is there a way, I know that, we as humans have a disadvantage because of our monkey mind to become,
Right.
completely soft or completely hard at the same time. But have you ever thought about indicating anything from nature that would show us an example that we could follow as a teacher as well, that would represent song?
Sure. So the greatest example, and coming out of the Taoist works of Lao Tzu and the I Ching, is that Tai Chi is a water method. I look at it as a water method. And so if you think of how water flows, right? When it flows and it runs into an obstacle, it doesn't sit there and protest that something's in its way. It simply, if it can, it just moves around it. If it's a complete dam, it just keeps filling up until it overflows it. But nothing really ever impedes the water from its movement. And no matter how small the crack that it can proceed through, it proceeds. What we find is that most people, when they're using tension, they're freezing, right? So if you again use that metaphor of water, your muscles are tight, they're frozen, you need to melt that. And so one of the things to be able to achieve, and one of the qualities of Sung, is that it's more about not doing than it is about the doing. It's about stopping what you're doing that's in the way. Removing the blocks is about letting go.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm wondering about on the the release upwards and outwards out of the body. Sometimes that's more difficult for people because if they're concentrating on Peng, they almost think that there's an impenetrable surface, the surface of the body is full and impenetrable, and it impedes the flow of energy from the body, through the body and out. So what ideas do you have about making it more easy for the to maintain Peng and yet have energy flow out of the body?
That's a great question. And so the idea of Jin and releasing the energy. So this is why when I use the metaphor of water, I talk about the floodgates opening. So release happens in both ways. So there is the release of that we think of relaxation, which is why I don't find that word to be optimal for describing what actually Peng is about or what Song is about. Because as you relax, you actually allow that other energy, that the chi, to flow through your body. And so what's happening is that as that releases, as that surge happens upward, right, that you're talking about, right, because you need to be able to issue energy as well as be able to receive energy, right? It's the two sides of the same coin. In the release, as you release the tension that impedes you, now what you start to feel is you start to feel the flow. And so it's really about being able to let that move through you. So again, it's a releasing action that you're doing. It's not what happens to people, I think, so often, and where it becomes really, this is the delicate balance point for it, is that people become willful, or they begin to have an agenda of what they want to accomplish. So I want to push somebody out. So they begin and they start to shove, and now they're using muscle tension to do that. And at the same time, we do have to have an agenda. So in the classics, it says the mind leads the chi and the chi leads the body. Now, if we accept the term chi as something that we all can probably, I think, since we're all teaching this, we probably all have our notion of what that idea, what that word refers to. It's that intrinsic energy that's already flowing through you. It's the same energy that makes your blood flow, that makes your lymph move, that makes your muscles grow, that makes a blade of grass will grow through concrete if it finds a crack. That's the same life force energy that we're talking about when we talk about chi. So when you allow that to flow naturally through you and to move through you, now it can be we have the ability as human beings with those great minds you're talking about to be able to direct that. And so we need to use the mind, the yi, the intention, to have an idea of what we're trying to accomplish. And yet we can't take it so far as to have a hardened agenda that what we need it to happen in a particular way, because we don't have control over what the other person is doing. They're going to do what they're going to do, but we're adapting to them. We're listening to them. We're responsive to them. But our energy is actually moving through us. It comes through us. It comes through our arms. It comes through our hands. It raises up. We talk about in Tai Chi, lift the back, raise the back, lift the head top. These are the emergence of what I call the spirit rising. And the spirit rises through the cerebral spinal fluid, through your bones, right? The strength in Tai Chi comes through the bones is what it said. And as that comes through you and it rises up through you, that's the energy, the same energy that the sunflower grows toward the sun. That's the energy that we're using to move. As opposed to what we also have is we have these bodies that move through space, so we can use our muscles and we can override the chi. So what I find is that most people who are using tension to move have accelerated. They've outrun the chi. They've just gone ahead of it. So now what they have is the mind moving the body, and they skip that mind leads the chi and the chi leads the body. You need to maintain that sense of the chi being what's moving the body, but the mind is intending it. So this is where this questioning becomes somewhat difficult, Bob, because you are intentional. You are doing something. You're not just a lump. You're trying to have an effect. And yet you have to abide by this natural progression of how the energy moves through you and can be then used by you effectively. in a Tai Chi manner.
Maybe you can describe it with the push hands. You're talking about push hands of receiving the other person's energy as your energy comes out, and the relationship between, if you're pushing, how you're receiving the other person's energy is essential in how your energy comes into them. That balance, as far as
Yeah.
things talking about release or song.
Mhm. So, in my opinion, the Tai Chi, the Yin is the predominant first, not predominant, but is the first phase. So the receptive is the first part of the engagement with another person in push hands. The first thing you need to do is be able to receive whatever they are. Now, different people come differently. So some people may come hard. Some people may be shy and not want to even try to reach you. I was dealing with somebody this morning that was bringing their hands up, but not quite making contact with me. So if I sit there and wait, their hands pause, a few inches away from me. But I have to receive that, even though they're not making contact with me. I need to receive that that energy. So if you receive the energy, you're like, I liken it to being like a soft ball or a balloon filled with air. You have the outbound energy that's expanding the balloon. It makes it have some substance to it, some strength to it, but it's still soft enough that if you poke your finger into it, it's receptive to it. There's no gap in time where the balloon has to think, oh, I'm being pushed, now I have to receive. It's instantaneous because it's its nature. And if we have the quality of Peng, so that we have that expansive nature and it can be fairly soft, and so that allows you to receive the incoming energy from another person. But because it's Peng, it doesn't simply collapse on itself and fold up and run away. It has a resilience. Another comparison would be like jumping on a trampoline. When the trampoline is sitting there, nothing's happening. The mat is just flat. But if you jump down on it, it receives your jump down. And then because it has that springiness, it springs you back up. So that's kind of how I see the receptive nature of how you receive that first incoming force, but you're immediately also, you're full still. So you actually do respond. But I think what's important in Tai Chi is that the first phase of it is that you're receiving. And if you take that into even a self-defense standpoint, where you're defending yourself and somebody's attacking you, well, you actually have to deal with what the attack is. You can't sit there and worry about what the attack might be, or what the attack was last week, or what the attack might be in another time. It's actually what is actually happening in real time, in the present moment, that is most important. And that if you can have that quality of central equilibrium, you have the best opportunity to be in the present moment with yourself as you are, and respond to the situation as it is, and not try to make something out of it that it's not.
So are you saying that between receiving and responding, there's no calculation?
No, there's no calculation. I mean, if let's say you're playing with somebody who's far less skillful than you, then a lot of times as a teacher, of course, I'm doing that, because I may have a specific thing that I'm working on somebody where I want to try to coax them into some kind of answer to my question. And the way I look at the push hands when I'm doing it in a training capacity, which I guess that's the only way you do push hands, is to train, is each situation is a new question. And can you answer the question that's being raised within the Tai Chi principles? Can you find a way to oh, I've gotten tensed up, oh, I'm falling over backwards. Can I now continue to be sung and allow that to move through me and get down to the ground? If it gets down to the ground, then what happens is my opponent starts to feel like they're pushing into the ground and they bounce out on their own. It's not that I'm pushing them.
Do do you want to give us any other ideas that you have that come from the book? Or just describe your process of writing that book?
Sure. Happy to. So it was something that I've wanted to write for a long time, and it was interesting because in the process of writing it, I kind of started at the beginning, and I wanted the book to be really a mind, body, and spirit assembly of information, right? So that there would be 3 volumes to it. There would be a volume for mind, a volume for body, and a volume for spirit, and how each of those things evolve out of Tai Chi. So the mind component of it was looking a lot at the philosophy of Taoism. What is Taoism? What is the theory of Tai Chi separate from the martial art Tai Chi? What are the theory of yin yang? All these things, which are for many people very esoteric ideas. And so I wanted to be able to address those ideas because they kind of are the prerequisite, I think, in some ways to Tai Chi. As I was working with an editor on it, one of the things that the editor said, well, it would be helped because the stuff was kind of heavy and thick and intellectual, to hear the stories of what's happened over the course of how did I get into Tai Chi, some of the stories and more memoir orientation. So I started to do that. And so now the chapters began to bounce back and forth. So I'd have a chapter on some theoretical thing and then a chapter out of my life, out of my experience in teaching that would actually illuminate what I talked about. And in the course of doing that, as I wrote the mind part of the book first, and then I started on the body. So the things we're talking about today, structure and release, are the early part of that second book. I realized that it's actually the body has to come first, I think, for people who are reading it, because I think it's more interesting and less off-putting. So then I started to look at it. Well, the body, which is kind of at the heart of what my teaching has been all these years, which I call the right to be. You have the right to be. Everybody has the right to be, and nobody has the right to infringe upon your right to be, and nor do you have the right to infringe on anybody else's right to be. And that sort of became sort of what the gist of that second book. And then as I got further into it and started writing about the applications and the push hands and the martial side of it, I realized actually that had to be its own thing, because I have a lot to say about that particular subject. And so that became its own thing. The spirit side of the book, a lot of that was about the healing aspects of Tai Chi, about some of the things you've written, Bob, that talk about the relationship between recovering from trauma, from how do you use Tai Chi to recover from injuries? How does Tai Chi deal with the emotions, and what are the emotional components of when somebody comes in and you feel threatened? So a lot of the benefit that I find out of the Tai Chi is not just being able to physically be able to become a fighter or anything like that. And those days are past my prime, so I'm not looking to be into the fight mode anymore. But that impulse, that fight, flight, freeze response, which is so deeply embedded in us as human beings, as part of our survival instinct, and comes up with great regularity, is something to really address. And something that actually, when you get that thing that I was talking about before about central equilibrium, you find yourself better able to balance right on that very razor thin edge between fight or flight, between wanting to run away from the situation, or I'm going to go take you out right now because you're pissing me off, or freezing and like, I don't know what to do, I'm completely stymied. Now, most of those situations are not going to happen in a physical encounter for most of us. It's going to happen when we come home and your wife yells at you, your kids are mad at you, your parents are mistreating you, whatever it might be, your workmates. Those are the situations where those same emotions rise up. And if you train in Tai Chi and you train in this art and you learn how to retain that center, that balance, that equilibrium, even in those situations rise up, you're much better able to deal with the situations. And so the ramifications for Tai Chi for me are really how it affects the entirety of your life and not just what happens in the training hall or in a physical altercation. And that's what prompted me to write the book.
I really like that point of view, because that's also, for me, one of the main things I got out of practicing Tai Chi is that I literally survive life in a sense, like when you're in the traffic, and just recently somebody tried to sue my wife and me, and well, literally be in tune with the situation, and then you can deal with it. And what you were asking about how do you respond, that's actually the right word. If something is attacking you physically or verbally or mentally, it's the response that you can have and not the reaction. Because always in reaction, you tense up, and then you have to take time to do something, and response doesn't have no time. Because you literally take responsibility of the situation and act upon it. And that saved me many situations the last couple of years. And that's the main thing I got out of Tai Chi. And that's also in my classes, we always do a bow in the beginning of the class, just to have a dedication, what you want to get out of the lesson. But also at the end of the lesson, we bow also and take in something about what principle did you learn. And it's not about the hour or 1.5 hours in class that you learn Tai Chi, but it's what can you take in daily life. So I like your view. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, no, the whole notion of reaction versus response is really key, because when you're reacting, it's exactly what you said. You're doing something, you've tensed up, you're now in a fight-flight mode. And in order to respond, you have to stop doing what you're doing before you can respond. Or your overreaction is so great that you have not actually responded appropriately to the situation that you're in. So you come home and your wife is yelling at you because of something that's going on in her day. And now the next thing you know, you've yelled back at her and you've escalated everything. You didn't need to escalate things if you could have simply been in a calmer state of mind and said, wait a second, let me just actually deal with the situation. Come on over here. Let's figure this out. And that ability to do that will offer so many benefits, countless benefits, because it's about life. It's not about what happens on the mat. Yeah.
This whole issue about response is you're both talking about when you come up with a situation, there's such a tendency to judge the dynamics of the situation. And how you're judging the dynamics of the situation depends on your whole mindset, everything that you bring with you. But you were saying before, Mark, that when you're in the middle of an interaction, there's no time to figure things out. You have to deal with the situation as it is at the moment and not bring the past in or think about the future and respond to what's really going on. So the ability in Tai Chi that you're training for is to see what's really going on and to have some creative control over it. So you're in a situation with somebody else, and the natural tendency is to say, well, they're attacking me in some way. But if you broaden your perspective, you might see that they're just angry or something. They're not in a good mood and they're taking it out on you, as you said. But you can be in creative control of that process and turn what they're doing into something completely different by your response.
Absolutely. 100%. So I was in a business meeting the other day. I was brought into a conference and we were speaking to people in Malaysia. And we were asked to bring a presentation in. And so we had prepared our presentation. And when we showed up to the event, which is also done online like this, we were thrown a curveball because a new person was brought into the mix that came from a different perspective that had no interest or connection to what we were doing, and was kind of in an adversarial mode when he started. So as I watched that, and one of our other presenters was talking, and I could see that this was kind of beginning to go in the wrong direction. So what I did was I just basically used the Tai Chi, and I brought him into the conversation. I welcomed him in. I asked him to participate. And as he first started to kind of like, I'm not really going to be doing what you want me to do kind of attitude. And I said, and I just kept bringing him in. And again, it's that idea that you were talking about where just receiving what he's giving, and then I can turn it around. And by the time we finished the conversation, he was on board with us. He was kind of playing in the same way that we wanted to play. And it became a very collaborative thing as opposed to adversarial thing.
Luke, do you want to come in on this? I know you came in a little late, so you didn't have a chance to say hello. If you're there.
He's there.
Oh, here we go.
There he is. Yeah, there he is.
He's hiding.
Hey, Mark, thank you very much for great presentation. I had an experience last night with a sixth generation Youngstyle family Taiji master. Also is a doctor in Chinese traditional medicine in California. And we had a online kind of like workshop together. I was there. And this guy introduced a practice called the Bigu. Bigu means you're fasting through Tai Chi practice. And then for the whole 2 hours, he was so tense. His body is tense, his mind is tense, because he tried to kind of like gender a lot of information in such short period of time. And also the most important thing, he tried to promote the program, ask people to join the program. And for 1 month's program for the fasting, Tai Chi fasting is $600. And Tai Chi class is every Sunday morning plus another weekday is $150 a month. And I just feel like, wow, he is a Tai Chi master. He is Chinese traditional doctor. But when he do the presentation, the only thing I experienced beside the information is what? Tense. His body is tense, his mind is tense, his emotion is tense. And because that tension, he even pronounced the fasting in Chinese words wrong. He pronounced Chinese fasting, say pigu. I'm sorry, you guys, somebody maybe know Chinese. Pigu means what? Ass.
What is it? Yes.
Yes.
He kept saying pigu, pigu, pigu. As whether it's not pigu, it's pigu. Yeah. So I was laughing I was trying to polite and not laugh along. So, okay, go back to your topic. How do you can see that Song is not just relaxed. Song is much more than relaxed.
Exactly.
And it's including the muscle, use less muscle strength, open all the gates of the energy, allow those energy flow from the bottom of foot to top of your head to your hands. Like you say, play the push hand. You got to move a lot of energy into your hands and arms in order to sense the energy of your playmate and response to that. So I think the song is physically, energy, also including energy level and mind level, all of that. So you are a senior practitioner. Did you develop any kind of practice to help your student to practice that principle? Do you have
Absolutely.
any practice?
Yeah, absolutely. So what's interesting about a lot of my approach, because I'm now working with a group of people that have been now with me for several years. So every time that we meet, whoever comes in first, basically I touch hands with them and then I feel what is going on in their body. So I feel how they're responding to me. Are they coming? Are they tense? Are they loose? Do they have a good structure? Do they have the right quality of pung? Are they actually able to relax? Most often, the issue is always that some level, either mind, body, or spirit or energy, is not releasing, or they're thinking, or they're trying to do something. Trying is one of the big mistakes that people make. And so most often when I feel whatever I feel is going on is really a question of trying to find out how to get them to answer the problem that they're having in that moment. But in a general way, one of the things that I've found, there are a few different things that I've found over the years that are very helpful for people who have some level of resistance in them, which is very often what it is. And when, let's say somebody came in and their shoulders are tight, they can't relax their shoulders. And so every time they're pushing, they're trying to use their arms and they're muscling. So what I ask people to do is find one area, one thing to work on, just one thing. Doesn't matter even what it is. It could be just relax your wrist. It could be just relax your lower back. It could be just wiggle your hips. And answer every problem that you encounter with that one answer. Every question, one answer. And what happens is that when you start to get the one answer to start to work for you, it goes to the Tai Chi principle. When one part moves, all the parts move, right? So if you're struggling to release your shoulder when your shoulder is what's tight, it's almost impossible because you're stuck there.
Yes.
So, but if I take your mind and say, let's put your mind on your hips and now just move your hip until and then if you move your hip and then suddenly your shoulder is free, you go, oh, it worked. And then you try again and something else happens. So one of the ways that I found to answer the question that you ask is that idea that you can just find one answer and just use that one answer. And you can choose whatever. You could be lift the top of the head. It could be raise the back. It doesn't matter which of the principles that you apply, but because what your mind will do is go, oh, well, what about my shoulder? What about my wrist? How about my elbow? My knee is locked up. And you start racing around. Your mind starts to go into all these different thoughts, which is very much slower than your body. Your body is much faster at responding than your mind ever can be with its thoughts. And it's not that you don't have your mind. Your mind is active, your mind is aware, right? Another example of what I suggest to people is don't fix the problem. Just observe the problem. Just put your attention on the problem and stay there. So if you're working in a cooperative manner with partner, right, and they lock you up, then have them just stay there. Just stay right where you're locked up. And then just pay attention to it. Don't move, don't change it, don't fix it, because fixing will always add more complications. Just pay attention to it. And what happens is the body will find its own resolution because the body wants to find comfort. The body doesn't like to be locked up. And it will find comfort in a way that if you try to think about it and say, oh, I got to pull my shoulder back. Well, you've just now added another thing to the fact that your shoulder is still locked. And now you've added more tension. So those are two ways that I suggest to people. One answer for every question and just stay where you are. Just stop and observe. It's like meditation. Stop, 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 stop. Mhm.
Well, this, I wish this would go on for another couple of hours. This is really good.